Hello everyone, this is the VR month in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Unique event of its genre in this country. It is the first that is going to be held in the city of Goma in the eastern part of Congo. Amazing place. There will be different type of event. There will be live events where we will have to gather together to have this immersive experience. There will also be an online event where we are gathering different profile, the top of the notch of Africa. They will come from Egypt to Kenya, from Nigeria. They will be talking to you about a wide range of topics, unique topics, from how to build a studio to how to build content and how to immerse people in this kind of VR, what is happening in the metaverse and how to develop it. I'm inviting all of you to join this event. We will share with you this link where you can go and register so that you can be part of this event. We welcome all of you and we can't wait to see you.
I'm the project manager at Goethe Technologies. I am live hosting this event from Goethe Technologies headquarters, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. And I believe a lot of people are attending this event live from Institute of Francis in Goma. Hello everyone, and hello everyone around the world. So what is the VR Men's and why are we actually hosting this event? Is to actually educate people and inspire more people and actually to show the potential that is inside Africa. And we're trying to showcase different projects and people from different places. So we thought to start from Ethiopia. So we have Dagmawi Bedilu from Ethiopia, which is a game thinker here from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So I think Dagmawi is going to introduce himself. So I'm going to leave the stage to Dagmawi. Wait, I should be in the stage too. So.
That's in a nutshell who Dagmawi Bedilu is. I'm into a lot of things. Maybe I will get to unfold it later on. Hi everyone again. It's going to be a bit of an interesting topic that I'm going to present for you guys. The topic has to do with, I don't know if you've already seen the slides. It's about immersion. Immersion is a very near and dear topic to one of our startups called Chewata Awaqi, and we specialize in the field of engagement. So by definition, whenever we say game thinking, we're talking about the science and art of engagement, and we ponder on one of the greatest questions ever asked, which is why do people like the things they like and why do people hate the things they hate? And this question we've been trying to work on. We've been working on it for the past 5 years. We have had our failures and our successes on the field, and we like to share some of them with you guys. So we believe it's immersion would be the ideal merger or like alignment between what we are witnessing with the future of VR, and at the same time how VR should be in the future. So let me go straight to my presentation. So like we're going to talk about Immersion 101. I called it 101 because I want it to be an introductory session. Might I check if it's clear and everyone sees my presentation? It's Itaya? Okay. So we it's not shared? Okay, let me share it again. did. Okay. So today's my topic of presentation, or like kind of think of it as a mini workshop, has to revolve around the concept of immersion, and I've called it Immersion 101 so that it can be an introductory session for whomever is interested and wants to know about what immersion is, which is, like I already said, a very near and dear topic for ourselves. And I don't know if you've heard it, like, but almost now everywhere you go, every entertainment content, like hearing the term immersion is always like it's a common phenomenon. So a new game comes out and the reviews are all about like how immersive it is and how uh, extremely realistic and how it embodies realism. Even like we use it for movies and we use it for books, and this kind of makes the term immersion a useless word because everyone uses it and there is no common consensus or a commonly agreed upon definition for it. So I would like to start by actually contemplating on this concept, and like I highly encourage everyone to kind of think what immersion could be. And if you kind of take the word like as it is, so usually we use the term immersion whenever we dip something into the water, like fully, and that's like what we call immersive. So immersion has to do with being dipped or like being completely embodied into something. That could be a high level definition of it. But before defining it, let me take you through different scenarios of what immersion could be. So imagine you're on a date with someone you like. So let's say you meet up around 6 p.m. and you're having this interesting dinner, and you're having the time of your life. You're enjoying your company, and all of a sudden the waiter will come and say, "We're about to close up," and you're like kind of shocked because you just started, like, and now you're like you check your phone and it's already midnight. Now you thought it was only like an hour or two maximum, but what it turned out to be like you spent 6 hours, and it felt like 2 hours. So we can say for this particular incident, the incident where the whole phenomena that you were going through was immersive. Okay, so let me give you another example. Let's go through another example, and imagine playing a game with a friend or a couple of friends sitting together and playing games. And while you're playing games, and you say, let's just play one round of games and start playing your game. And eventually, by the time you stop, you found out like you've played, let's say, 12 or 20 rounds. Even though you said or you wanted to only do one round of game. So such kind of like phenomena can also be put into like, we can say during that moment, you were somehow immersed in that situation. Let's take another example. I don't know how many of you have already played this VR experience. It's like a board hanging off atop of a high-riser building, and you're actually putting on a glass, an Oculus or a Vive VR glass, and you're working on a virtual board in a way, but in real life, you're actually standing on a board on the ground. And even though you really know that you're completely safe, but your mind can't click into the fact that you're safe and you'll be panicking. I don't know how many of you have seen those videos where people were crying, shouting, and screaming whenever they were going through such kind of a VR experience. So if you kind of take this example, even though while knowing that the reality is different, their mind could not accept the reality. So rather, the mind decides to fall into the trap of this virtual experience. So during this moment, also like we can use the term, "Oh, this person was completely immersed in the experience." Moving on, let's take another example. So we always hear the term immersion being used by book lovers. So whenever people are reading books, yes, they also use the term immersive, and especially if you're reading into a sci-fi, let's say a sci-fi book or a fantasy book, You sit down in the morning, you open up the book, and it's already nighttime, and you still reading. And without knowing it, time kind of flies away. So this is also a concept like we can associate with immersion. I don't know if you have if there any one of you have experienced it an augmented reality game like this is Pokemon Go, and imagine walking across the street and you hear a message popping up in your pocket. You take out your phone, and there, like inside the screen on top of a ground in front of you, you see your favorite Pokemon character Pikachu, and even though it doesn't exist in real life, you actually see it in that screen existing. And we can also consider this to be an immersive experience. So you can see there are a lot of perspective in which we can actually understand the concept of immersion. And like also like I don't know how many of you have already seen the movies Jumanji. I prefer the first one, or like Ready Player One, in which we are living in this futuristic world, or and in the case of Jumanji, there is this game that kind of takes you from the reality and puts you completely immersed in that imaginary world. Or Ready Player One, where people put on gadgets and they have a parallelly existing virtual world where you can make money, earn a living, live a life, find meaning, and all of those. So this has been in the books, in the fantasy books, ever since the 18th and 19th century. And recently, with the phenomenon of VRs and ARs, people are saying like the time has come, and we are actually moving into those these particular scenarios. Last but definitely least, by far the most immersive experience we can actually think of as found already in our pockets. So what used to be a simple communication gadget now has become a complete extension of our body. Like we can, if you ask people about their smartphone, it's where we have our favorite moments. It's where we communicate with everyone we love. It's where we work. It's where we have a good time. It's where we capture our amazing moment. It's where we express our deepest emotions and thoughts. And it has literally become the Star Wars 3CPO, like C3PO or R2D2 in real life. So it has become that extension of our body where we can't live without almost. So all these experiences that you've seen, starting from the dating scene in this gadget in our pocket, all of them, we can consider them to be an immersive experience. So now it begs us to ask the question, okay, what do they all have in common? Because if we can find the common denominator across these experiences, we can say like we can literally define immersion, and after defining it, we can come actually deconstruct it and try to replicate it and make whatever experience that we want to be as immersive as possible. So if you look at all these experiences, from the virtual to the physical to the actual communication with an actual person or with a virtual avatar, all of them, they had one thing in common. And that one thing is this 3-pound organ called brain and all the 5 senses associated with this brain. So it's very interesting because like the brain, biologically speaking, it's the least evolved out of all our senses, and by far the most powerful one. And it got this power, and it's because of this entity, this 3-pound entity, that immersion was somehow possible. And if we can, a very interesting definition of immersion would be that moment where you lose track of time and space. So think about the first scenario we were talking about, like the dating scene. People are enjoying that moment so much that the brain stopped even keeping track of time and space. I don't know if you have noticed, like a lot of people using the public transport or in the buses, they'll start playing a game on their mobile phone and they miss their spot, like or their stop, and the bus will take them someplace else. So this also like the mind is completely focused in one activity that it finds extremely interesting and extremely worth spending all of the mind's energy on, to a point that the mind also lose track of time and space. So this is one definition of immersion, but this definition would actually not take us a long way. We can't deconstruct it, and we can't use it as a framework. So another definition that's usually common in the VR field is defining immersion as a feeling of embodiment or a state of existence. Or becoming something, like in a place or a thing. So if you walk into, for example, the Adwa experience by Goethe Technologies, like it kind of puts you in that time and place where the Battle of Adwa was happening. So you feel that as if you were taken back by a time dimension to a specific timeline. Or like the previous example of standing on top of a high-rise building is also the same thing. Even though you're standing on the ground, the feeling of embodiment is so real that people would, the mind would not differentiate what's reality and what's pixel-generated majorly. So such kind of intense experiences, we can also define a good definition of immersion. But these two lacks the element of framework, component that we can't break it down into a workable framework. So maybe looking into a separate and the most one, like for us, the most interesting understanding of what an immersion would be as it's a special relationship or an experience. It's a special relationship one has with a particular system. So this by far we've found to be a perfect definition of immersion, in the sense that if you think about it, whether you're playing a game or you are in a virtual reality, or whether you're with another interesting person, or you're using a gadget like VR Google, or like you're reading a story or doing your hobby, which are all of them being an immersive experiences. The only thing they have in common is there is this particular individual that's interacting with a particular system, and these two entities seem to have a very interesting and special relationship. So if you look at a gamer playing a game, that complete immersion moment, you can see the gamer, which is the person interacting with a game, which is the system. So understanding it in such a way gives us a good framework to understand how immersions occur and what immersion is. So at the end of the day, this special relationship, if you look at it, it's only found in this brain of ours, which makes it a perceived and imagined experience rather than an actual experience. Because, for example, playing Candy Crush, if you look at it from a realistic point of view, just click on a screen that has like pixels firing, but like how the player is feeling during the experience is completely different and completely immersive. So it has more to do with the imaginative capability of the mind rather than the actual existence of those things. If you have played any board games or any role-playing games in the physical world, even though people are using cards and papers during their game time, they completely get lost at that moment. They can fight, they can scream, they can show all sorts of emotions. And so this tells us that immersion has to do more with the imagined perceived realities than the actual reality. So we can break down immersion into these three big components. So one, you have me, or like anyone who's the user, the consumer of that product. We can call it the player. And you have a system. This system could be another player or another individual, or it could be a game, it could be a chore, it could be an activity worth doing, and then between these two objects, or between these two subjects, there is the mind creating a perceived relationship. So for a gamer, this system is going to be a game. For someone who loves their job, this is going to be their work. For someone who loves their partner, the other system is going to be their partner. And the perceived relationship could be love or any other emotion. So at the end of the day, it has always been true that the quote that mind over matter, because a lot of people don't even care like whether that system really exists or does not. As a matter of fact, the more unreal it is and the more abstract it is, the easier and the more immersive it can be, because the life could not be as immersive as we wish, because there is an actual danger in real life compared to a simulated world where the dangers are just simulated. Like artificial systems seem to have more safe environment compared to the other one. So, interestingly speaking, this definition kind of overlaps into our experience, like a game design philosophy, in which we always say a player going through an interactive experience, a system built with unnecessary yet meaningful obstacles. These are the meaning or the perceived understanding of the notion to achieve a particular objective. We're going to come to this, but this is like to correlate the two worlds, like the world of virtual reality and also like the world of games, and how they kind of overlap and complement one another. So once we understand what immersion is, which is a perceived reality by a player or an actor towards an actual system and a relationship created between these two entities. Now, how does it work is another very important question. How does immersion work? How can we break it down? Would be a good point to look at. So let's go back to our framework that we've created, where a player exists and there's a system and there's a perceived relationship by the player, and we can call this perceived relationship more or less an imagination. So this is the imagination of the player within that system. So the Oculus glasses you're wearing and the lightsaber game that you're playing inside, even though it's pixels, the mind has perceived it to be using its imaginative skills in actually putting that player in a almost close to realistic, meaningful experience where you get to enjoy that playful scenario. So we can give another term for it, and which would make it easier for me to take you through the whole mini workshop. So let's call the system or whatever you're interacting with, or what the element, let's call it the content. So this could be a 3D game, this could be a virtual reality experience, this could be the ADWA experience, or any other like reading or immersive experience. Reading book, or it could be another person. So let's call that a content. And let's say like the player who's actually interacting with the system, let's call it a consumer. And the relationship between the consumer and the content, we call it context. So let's go each one by one and understanding the three elements and how they come together, create this sense of immersion. So we're looking into a content. Like I said, since it's a perceived world, now for the mind, it doesn't care whether that perceived imagination has to do with an actual object existing in the real world or a fictional element existing in the imagination. So we usually find ourselves like daydreaming and creating scenarios to keep our mind entertained, right? Like whenever we have time, we can sit, we can daydream, and that's actually also like the mind trying to create a virtual reality within the mind to create an immersive experience, so that time is not spent with boredom. So technically, whenever we talk about immersion, it doesn't really have to be a physical entity or neither a physical entity or a fictional one. All it has to do is it has to exist as a subject, an object. It need to be sensed by either of our five senses. So if we can either smell it, either test it, either see it, or hear it, or feel it, it's more than enough for the brain to create an imaginative, perceived experience about that thing. So this means like this avatar of mine can actually, which is a combination of pixels, can for me it could be a perceived realism. So whenever, for example, if this avatar is in a game and if it gets killed, I would have that sense as if I am killed. And it reminds me of an experience we were going through when we were kids. And usually when me and my brother used to play games, whenever like we get killed inside the game, we shout out like, "You're dead, you're dead!" And my mom used to always come and beat us up and say like, "Stop cursing, like stop saying this." But for us, like during that moment, it was hard to differentiate between that virtual avatar of ours and this actual physical existing body of ours. So for us, that avatar has always been an extension of ourselves. So the mind is so powerful, it can take pixels that were ordered in a certain manner to create a visual interpretation of something, and we can associate ourselves with that entity. So for me, this avatar is me, and whenever I create a content related with this avatar, it's as if I am creating it. And also the same with everyone consuming this content, will see as if like I am sharing that content just by looking at this image. So now it takes us to these old systems, whether it's a VR experience, a board game, a card game, work, a hobby, call it whatever it is. All of this are systems that are created, and the mind perceives them to be more than they are. Like when we're playing poker, it's more than just numbers and colors on a paper. For us, in our mind, there is a perceived world. Whenever we watch football, it's just more than grown-ups kicking a ball. Whenever we're playing lightsaber inside a virtual reality experience, it's more than just moving an electronic gadgets that have sensors and wearing a screen on our faces. Like, so it's more than that for the mind. So, but this begs us to ask a question: just because you create a 3D experience and you put it on a VR inside a VR class, it doesn't necessarily mean that experience is immersive. So there is more to the content than just having it exist. So there are a couple of things that a content needs to fulfill before it becomes immersive. So the first thing is it needs to be interactive, meaning it should have a way of receiving actions from the player or the character that's interacting with it. It should also be engaging in the sense that once it receives the action, it needs to respond to it. So when we are in a VR experience and whenever we're holding those sensors and when we move our fingers, that's the interaction element, and we need to see that response reflected upon the virtual world. So meaning our virtual fingers also like move. So that's engaging. And then it needs to be enjoyable in a sense. It needs to have a sense of mastery within it. I'll come to what enjoyment means. And finally, when this loop rotates, it becomes technically what we call immersive. So if it's has an interactivity, an engaging, and enjoyable element, like we can say that content has the potential to be immersive. Now, going a bit deeper, if we want to make a content to be as immersive for users, this is a typical pattern we use. Like you might have heard it. Like it has a different name. They call it the habit loop, or like we call it the game thinking formula. Also, like it can be also called the immersive loop. So whenever you think of an experience, that's immersive. So taking you back to the first scenario, let's say you're walking into a hotel and you look at you come across like say someone beautiful, let's say. So the moment you see that beautiful, meaning the moment your eye realize that entity, we call that a trigger, where the T is standing for. So always, if you look at games or any VR experience, they extend their arms so that they can create a trigger point for you. So if you play any games, when you start a game, it says play test play. So that's a triggering point. And every time you push a button, it moves. So now once the trigger exists, once we see that, we create an anticipation in the mind. This is where the imagination comes into the picture. So if I come across a beautiful lady, which is a trigger point, in my mind, I will create an anticipation. So the anticipation could be, maybe if I meet her, like she can become my friend, or she can become my wife. We can get married, have kids. Like, so this is the brain creating this imagination and creating these possibilities. So we call that an anticipation. So because of this anticipation and the level of excitement by this anticipation, it pushes me to perform what we call an action. So now, because of the anticipation or like that imagined reality, I have to go to this lady and I have to say, high word. So that's an action. So once I perform the action, the system, in this case, the lady, will be giving me back a response, which could be a high, or like maybe you should say, I have a boyfriend, like, which could be a negative response. So depending on the type of response and how that response correlates with that situation that was created in my mind, I have a joyful moment. So if she says hi back, that triggers a second loop, because that's a positive response, and it will continue, hopefully, till we start dating, get married, have kids, and live happily after. Or it might eventually it might resolve into a negative feedback loop, in the sense like the experience stops being immersive, or the experience goes down. Now, also, like, we can go one layer deeper and try to understand what joy is in immersive experiences. So in immersion, we always talk about the joyful. So for something to be joyful, it has to have these three elements. So we're talking about autonomy, meaning whatever you do, you have to do it based on your free will. That's why a lot of people don't like their job, because they don't have autonomy in their job. They will have bosses that tell them what to do and what not to do. So sense of autonomy is lost. But if you look at games or interactive experiences, there is no game out there in the world that forces you to play it. So you pick up your phone, you open the calculator app whenever you want to do some calculation, but you pick up your phone and open Candy Crush, because no one forces you. It's just because you want to enjoy your time and just do it. So that is the first element of joy, which is autonomy. And also, like, there is this sense of mastery. So whenever we're interacting with immersive systems, they always augment the experience. So if you're playing a game, first it becomes easy, but as you go through it, you become better at it, and the challenge continuously grow together with your experience. So that's what we call mastery. So the sense of, okay, I'm becoming the better version of myself. So when it comes to virtual realities and any immersive technology, this is usually designed within the system. So you start first, and every time you pass a level, it gets the difficulty increase as you go. And finally, least but definitely not least, is it needs to have a purpose. Meaning, whatever you do, you need to understand the destination of it. So that's why if you look at lots and lots of simulated or like virtual reality experiences, they are designed like any other game, where there will be an objective to finalize to get to by the end of the experience. So once we combine this, it brings us to the concept of content, immersive content types. So now we know how to make what immersion is. Now we know, like, we can break down how immersion into the components that it has. Then, like, we understand why things are immersive, or what makes them immersive. And currently now we want to see, okay, what type of immersive content do we have? So just to divide it into three major categories. The first one is called spatial immersion, and this is like anything that has to do with visual dimension. So VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality, a video game, like most of them, almost most immersive contents have to do with spatial immersion. So this spatial immersion takes us to a place that we cannot go, and they give us an experience that could also be fictional or almost impossible to achieve. So this, for the brain, is one of the best amazing experiences to have. So it's one of the most joyful experiences. So whenever you enter into a virtual reality inside a VR glass, what's happening is you're entering into a spatial immersion, meaning you're completely losing the sense of your actual existence or physical existence or the location you're at, and you can be transported to this virtual world that might exist or might not exist in the real world. So if you look at VR tourism, for example, you can be in Ethiopia and you can go and visit the Taj Mahal or the Paris or New York, and you can actually go visit the sites as if you are there. So these are what we call immersion, spatial immersion, whenever it has to do with physically, visually existing entities. Now, the second type of immersion type are what we call meaning immersion. This has to do with stories, like the connection and the empathy you create with the element or like the system you're working with. So whenever we're playing a role-playing game, the role or the avatar we're playing and the experience of the avatar gets to be interlinked with our experience. So it simulates a sense of empathy. So whatever is happening to that virtual personality of ours gets to be represented in this physical personality of ours. So if you look at social media, for example, Facebook, Twitter, all these media platforms, they create this meaning immersion. So all the friends are there, like with avatars and profile pictures, and you get to interact with them by using chatting and reaction buttons and messaging. And also at the end of the day, you can raise your fan base, you can get feedbacks, and all of this can happen within these experiences. And the third type is what you call mechanical immersion. So mechanical immersion also exists. Think of this as going through a virtual reality experience without your virtual hands and with the virtual hand. So if you're just doing a 360 tour of a place, that's pure spatial immersion. But if you can interact with objects there, and if there is the element of touching and the element of moving, and if there is a mechanics, time exists, if time exists, if movement exists, all these mechanics exist, then we call that mechanical immersion. And the mechanical immersion has to do with having a big chunk of it lying in the design of the immersion. And by far, for example, whenever we're designing any interactive experiences, mechanical immersion is our ideal go-to place because it has its thing buried down to the human psychology and how the brain functions. So we can see a couple of examples with this. So with this said, if there is anyone who would like to ask me a question, or if there are questions coming on the please stop me and you can ask me the questions. Okay. So now we're somehow done with the content, and we know understand how a content is designed and how it can be immersive, and what elements it needs to consider to be immersive. Now we can actually go to the context, and the context is the relationship between the consumer and the content. So the very first question would be, usually this question we receive it from most of our creators. They would come to us and, okay, how do I start, or where do I start to make an immersive experience, or let's say a game or a virtual reality experience, or where do we start? And we've created this framework that we've been working on for the past almost 4 years, and we have come to find it extremely handy. And there are 4 places that you can start from. So the first one is you can start from emotions. So whenever you want to create an immersive experience or an immersive physical, digital, or virtual game, the one thing you can do, you can start from emotions. So you can ask yourself, I want to make people cry, or I want to make people laugh. Give me a moment, let me respond to this. Okay, so going back to it, so we can start with emotions. We can simply ask ourselves, where do we start? Do we start with emotions? Should we make people laugh, cry, be happy, be peaceful? So we can start from here. Another place we can start from is we can start from a mechanics. So a mechanics would be, I want to make something that I want to make a virtual experience where people can run inside, or I want to create a virtual experience where people can touch one another or punch one another. Like, so we can come to an element of mechanics within the app. A third one, a third starting place would be a message. So you can start designing an immersive experience by a message you want to pass. Like, what do you want people to learn by the end of the experience? Like, once they finish the experience, and what do you want them to learn from it? And last but definitely least is a purpose. A purpose would be, why are you designing this immersive experience? So, for example, whenever we talk about immersion experience for change, then it's ideal, like, to start from a purpose. So I want to transform the education system. Like, that could be a good purpose. I want to create an immersive education system, or I want to create an immersive entertaining work of art. So this could be a purpose, and a purpose is one way that you can start asking for. So so I think most of it is already clear. Let me go to a very interesting element like that people you need to consider, like as I'm finishing up. So we usually follow this. It's a pattern that's really popular in designing immersive experiences. We call it the flow state. So the flow state is more or less like a similar term to an immersive state. So a flow state is achieved when the challenge we're giving our users or our consumers is matched with the skills they have. So in a way, as you can see in the graph, for example, if you give a small challenge to someone who has a big skill, the experience becomes a boring experience. Okay, so when the player or the user or the consumer has great potential, but the challenge is really small and the skill set is really high, we call that a boredom state. So usually when we're bored, it seems the mind needs more entertainment, or the mind needs more engagement. On the other hand, if we're giving a very complex challenge, someone who doesn't have the skill set, that creates anxiety, or like that makes people anxious, meaning it creates the thought that I can't do it, or it's too much for me, and that's not a good state. So usually this is where most people are in their lives as well, and that's why usually we don't say consider life to be as immersive as it could be. And what we want to do whenever we're designing an immersive experience, whether it's a game or a virtual reality experience, is we're trying to match the challenge with the skill. So every time someone achieves a particular skill, we up the challenge a bit so that the skill is somehow strained and the skill is guaranteed. So eventually that we can continue the flow state with the people. So this is one framework that's highly recommended. Also, like one of the most popular immersion techniques is using a story, like any 3-act plot story where you have a problem first. This is every movie we have ever watched. So finally, there's an obstacle like that keeps coming back and coming up, and then there is a climax where the actor or the protagonist character kind of defeats the bad guy, and there is a relief. So this kind of storytelling also have a tendency of creating immersion. But like before I close up, one thing I would like really to emphasize on is the purpose of and like why do we want to make things immersive? Because let's not forget, immersion doesn't always mean something good. Okay, like, immersion also can mean an addictive tool. Like we're living in a time where social media has become an addictive system, and we hear about a lot of games being addictive and making us become less of ourselves, or like keeping us away from the things that we value the most, rather than like boosting our performance. So now when we start talking about the actual application of this VR, it has become immersive technologies have become extremely applicable nowadays. You see them in sports, like being used to train sport people. You use them being used in military, in education, in the medical field. There was this experience where burn victims go through this virtual reality experience and just put them in a very cold environment in the virtual reality, and they will literally stop feeling the pain in their physical existence, their real existence. So the possibility of of tricking the mind into healing itself is a very, very interesting phenomenon that we are seeing thanks to this immersive technology. And also, like, it has become, we've seen what the possibility it has with the Adwa VR, or recently I was looking at what Goethe technology was doing with this camera simulation, which is like a way of telling our stories without actually requiring all the resources that are needed. So these are some possible ways where we can apply immersion technologies. And for least but not least, I will just leave you everyone with the concept of a context. Like, it's easier. A lot of people are focusing on, whenever we talk about immersion or like immersion technology, everyone is talking about the hardware or how to make a 3D world or how to make a virtual reality experience. So we tend to spend most of our time in the technicalities. Like, is it possible to create a virtual reality experience? Can we design it? Which skills do we? Like, so we kind of focus on the hard skills, like 3D graphics design, 3D world design, animation, simulation. All these concepts, like game design, all these concepts are being evolved whenever we talk about the virtual reality or immersive technology. But I think the biggest thing that we're missing in this conversation is the concept, which is why do we have to do it? For example, if as Africans, for example, what can we do in our context? What would make sense to, like, what would be the perfect way of implementing a virtual reality experience that can alleviate or poverty, let's say, or that can help our people or our lives to be much better? So can we tell a different experience from an African point of view, rather than just mimicking whatever is being created and considering it as a success? So I will leave everyone with answering this question. So yes, we know how to do it, what to do, we know what it is and how to use it, but why do we need to do it? Would be our my last, and I'll leave you with a question. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Dagi. That was really an eye-opening. It actually opened my third eye to learn and know more about immersion. So I feel like Danny was immersed in actually explaining the immersion. At the meantime, I see people asking different questions. So one of our attendees asked you if you have any favorite immersive experience. Can you hear me, Doug?
Yeah.
So
by far, like, so I don't know if, how many of you are familiar. We have a committee called Casa Games, where we meet on a monthly basis and try out different experiences. So my most recent addiction would be it's actually a board game. So unfortunately, it's not a virtual reality experience, but it's a board game, and it has to do with, it's called the Sunken Iceland. So you're playing characters, like trying to discover a treasure in this island that's sinking. So it's a total collaborative kind of experience, and I've found it to be one of the most immersive experiences that I have ever experienced. But if the question has to do with an actual virtual reality experience that I went through and I found amazing, would be of course Lightsaber. Everyone loved it, how it was implemented, but there was and we have seen this roller coaster horror movies being taken into this virtual reality experience. But one thing I found extremely interesting to me is like this virtual painting workshop. I think it was Bini from Goethe Technologies that showed me. So creating these 3D paintings within this empty canvas, a 3D canvas that you can do, and you can actually create these 3D paints and sculptures, like without even having a paint on your hand or on your face. So that was like that's opened the door to a huge possibility of where immersion technology could be applied as well. And I can't wait to live in a reality where, yeah, the metaverse exists and we have meetings and we have our avatars and we walk around the town, like buying virtual real estates and driving virtual cars and I don't know, having virtual kids. I think that a lot of people in a lot of people's imagination, but yeah, maybe it might need some time for a lot of content creators to come and make the technology accessible to everyone.
Thank you very much, Dagi. So on the last one, we have Nathan asking a clarification on the last point. I think you mentioned something about creating something for Africa. I mean, actually telling our stories by using this technology. So I think he wanted some clarification on that point.
Okay, that's so. One of the projects we were managing, which was EnterAfrica, and unfortunately, most of the discoveries, especially after the 19th, 18th century, most of the technologies were from the West and were inspired by Western philosophies. And for example, if you like starting from the Industrial Revolution, the information revolution, the information age, and also now the knowledge age, it's all like fueled and inspired by the Western philosophy and Western mindsets, and pretty much clear like to see, for example, like in the world of internet, where privacy is a big topic because for the Western, like for someone living in the West, individualism or like privacy as a big topic. And also like when you look at ideologies, like for example, capitalism tends to exist here. And even like from a religious perspective, most of the new technologies we're going through are inspired by the Western essence. So it begs us to ask the question now, like, and I want everyone to kind of contemplate on this topic. Imagine the internet being discovered in Africa. Like, imagine like if Africans were the first to create internet, would it be different than the one we have? I say yes, it would completely be different because it would have different roots and principles and foundations to be built upon. So the same with virtual reality and immersion. So yes, we can go ahead and just do whatever is being done, and we can't call it ours, but we call that translation. And it's a common phenomenon. For example, you can take a very popular game like Candy Crush or Temple Run, and you can just change the characters to be black and to have the background to be a wild forest, and you can consider that to be an African game. But is that really what an African game is? Is that how we depict the essence of Africa? Because whenever we talk about identities, it's about philosophies, ideologies, and lifestyles. So if whenever we want to recreate something, the question I'm asking everyone to do is, let's go down to the essence and try to reimagine the essence itself. So whenever we think of virtual realities, yes, we can make forests and we can have black people running in the forest, but I don't consider that to be a virtual reality experience designed by Africans. But rather to take an instance, for example, like living in a community, like companionship, having a borderless continent, having a diverse culture, being multilingual. This kind of essences, they can be interpreted into these virtual reality immersive experiences, and they can not only replicate our physical features and our environmental features that we can touch, but they can also somehow digitize and digitally transform the essence that's within us, like the philosophies we follow and the values we hold up. So that's my take on the topic.
Thank you very much, Dagi. You've actually mentioned a lot and actually spoken a lot about us as an Africa, as a continent, to actually work on immersion and to actually generate content that is actually based on real stories. So that is really actually moving one. So at the meantime, I would like to invite anyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to actually ask us in the comment section. I'll be asking Dagi right here, so that he could actually answer the questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. At the meantime, Dagi, if you have any questions to the audience, I feel like this is the perfect timing. So what do you want to ask people? Do you have any questions for them? Because they've been attending the entire session, so there must be a question.
Okay. I already asked one of my first questions, which is to not just think only on the cover, or whatever is being seen. Whenever we think of virtual realities, let's not only think about 3D worlds and interacting within a 3D world. Let's go beyond that, and let's start asking how was the interaction, what is the meaning of that interaction, why should we have that interaction, and what message are we trying to pass and portray, for whom are we passing that message, what are we trying to say, which narrative are we trying to tell. For example, when we're talking about the Adwa experience, or whenever if we want to put the Adwa experience Goethe Technology is doing into a virtual reality, let's go beyond just having the characters there and fighting and shooting one another. Let's go on a deeper level and let's start asking real questions. What was Adwa? Was it just Africans defeating a colonizer? Is that it? Is there a bigger meaning to it? Is there a meaning it has related to humanity, value, integrity? We can go deeper and ask this question and trying to bring these answers into also the virtual reality. And it doesn't have to always mimic the physical reality per se. But this is my first take, and I want everyone to explore this question. What does it mean to be an African? Except our physical features, our language, and our the clothes we wear, and the lifestyle that we have, and to go beyond and ask a deeper question. And also at the same time, it's more or less a call out for everyone who is interested in working in this area, and the area of immersion, engagement, and creating a proactive community per se. If anyone is interested in working in this area, we'll be more than happy to partner up with such entities to explore a deeper understanding of what immersion and engagement could be. And I would like to thank the organizers and those who invited me to actually give the first opening mini workshop or session, which was a very delight for me. And I hope you find the content I shared interesting and helpful. And if anyone has a question, feel free to reach out and continue the conversation after the session is over. And at the same time, be proactive. Like the best game or the best reality that was ever created as life. And let's also try to immerse ourselves fully in this thing called life as well. So that would be my final remark.
Thank you very much, Dagi. So it was a very informative session, as we've learned from the comment session. And thank you very much for everyone for being here. And saying hi from Addis to Goma. People are actually attending directly from Institute of I feel like Dagi has to share the content, right? I think he's going to share us the content, the entire PowerPoint. So we're going to actually link it here in the comment section so that you can reach out. At the meantime, we have another session happening at this time, specific time, tomorrow morning from Rwanda, Confident in French, so miss it not. And thank you very much all for being here. We'd like to mention some people that actually supported here. Daniel Getachew from the studio, and I'm also Meti Girma live from the studio. Thank you very much. Hope to see you tomorrow morning.
Bonjour à tous, c'est le mois de la réalité virtuelle en République démocratique du Congo qui va se passer à Goma, à l'est du pays. Un événement unique à son genre, organisé pour la toute première fois en RDC par l'Institut français de Goma et ses partenaires. Nous vous invitons à nous rejoindre à Goma pour les activités de la réalité virtuelle en ligne et en présentiel à partir du 10 mai 2022 pour vivre toutes les expériences immersives ensemble. Plusieurs experts du domaine en Afrique, de l'Égypte, du Kenya, de l'Éthiopie, de l'Afrique du Sud et du Nigeria vous parleront des différents sujets sur comment créer un studio, comment développer du contenu de la réalité virtuelle, etc. Enregistrez-vous et à bientôt.